Hello, that was our fancy theme song you may have heard a couple of strains of in terms of what I was whistling. I'm Jeff Bushman. This is the Jeff Bushman Experience, but you probably know that or you wouldn't have tuned in. Anyway, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome and thank you. And if you're back with us, one has to question your sanity. But leaving that aside, glad you are with us. We're going to be discussing a couple of things this evening. It'll just be me this week. We have some guests set up for the next several weeks, except for next week, because next Sunday when we would normally record, we may be out of town. So we're probably not going to do a show next week, but will each Sunday thereafter. In the meantime, in breaking news, Jimmy Carter was sent home to Atlanta today. The 90-year-old former president became ill, although the illness has not been specified, while he was in Guyana. And he's on his way back to Atlanta, presumably, where he'll get treatment or just rest, whatever the case is. He was there to oversee the elections, and now he's not. Also, let me tell you briefly what we are going to discuss this evening. We're going to discuss the economy, pigs, and the real kind. We're also going to discuss money in politics and constitutional amendment. All of those are in some fashion connected, and we'll talk about that. Also, I wanted to let you know, for those of you who regularly watch the program, that we upload every Sunday, by the way. First off, by the way, you can subscribe. I pointed downward because under this video, assuming you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe so that you're notified of future programs. And we would ask you to do that, of course, because that helps us. Also, in terms of technical matters, we will be doing this first video for a total of about 20 or 25 minutes. If we don't finish, then we will begin another video. And so if you are watching this and it seems to end abruptly, then you can, of course, look for the second video. And if it doesn't end abruptly, there won't be a second video. So we'll see how long we go. And that's our situation. Also, we just received word, we're kind of proud of this, so I wanted to share it. We just got word from YouTube that within the United States, we are the third most watched weekly video series, which is hosted by a host of Ukrainian descent. And so we're kind of proud of that, and thank you, and please tell your friends to make those numbers allow us to go up to number 2 in that category. Thank you. By the way, a number of people have mentioned things in terms of how one looks on camera, and you've probably heard that when it comes to TV or video, the camera adds 10 pounds. Okay, we've actually researched this. It's actually 8.25. So if you're concerned about looking heavier on camera, you can limit that concern. Okay, this week it was announced that unemployment in the United States is at 5.4%, which is the lowest rate since the Great Recession began. Also, and we'll talk more about the unemployment rate in just a minute, but also productivity is down in the United States, and wages are flat. And we'll talk about why the unemployment news is good, the productivity news, that is, productivity is down, is also good news, and why wages being flat is not good news, especially if you're a wage earner, but why it's not that bad. Okay, we'll come to those. First, unemployment. Here's some ammunition for the water cooler for tomorrow. I'm assuming you're watching this Sunday evening, but anytime you're watching, when you next go to the water cooler at work, this will be some ammunition for you. When you happen to mention that unemployment is down to 5.4%, some of your work comrades, work associates will say, well, but that's not a real rate because it doesn't include all the people who have stopped looking or who have part-time work when they want full-time work. And that is what is called trivially true. That is, it's true, but so what? I'll tell you what I mean about that in just a second. Skull. Okay, that's good. Okay, what it means, what I mean by the fact that it doesn't make any difference, which is the point here, is this. Unemployment this week is down to 5.4%. That means of all the people who are looking for full-time work and are not employed, only 5.4% of that group is in fact unemployed. Okay, when your friends at work tell you, yeah, but that doesn't mean anything because, for the reasons I stated, a lot of people are working part-time, a lot of people have quit working. The question you need to ask them is, how different is that from 2 years ago? And when they say, what do you mean? You can say, okay, the unemployment rate was, make up a number, I don't remember what it was 2 years ago, but let's assume it was 7.5%. The unemployment rate was 7.5%. At that time, were there people who had given up looking for work and people who were working part-time when they wanted full-time work? The answer to that, of course, is yes. How about 4 years ago, in 2011? Yeah, it was true then, too. How about 2009? Yeah, true then, too. How about 2005? The answer, no matter what year you pick, is going to be yes. Now, there are some things which cause that number to be elastic. That is, those people who have stopped looking for work, the long-term unemployed, all those things, they change. But what's always true is that the unemployment statistic only reflects one thing, which is the number of people who are looking for full-time work who are unemployed and who don't have, who obviously don't have full-time work or part-time work. That's what that number reflects. It is always only a partial representation of what's going on. The thing for you to share with your work associates, I don't know if you'd call them friends, because I don't know the people at work. I don't know your people. Anyway, but if you are talking to them and they're saying, it's all phony, it's not all phony. The unemployment number is only a metric, okay, and it's not a full metric. That is, it's not a full measure of what it is that's going on in the economy, even in terms of employment. But if the rate is 5.4% today, and it was 7% 2 years ago, the only people who don't think that's an improvement are those who believe in conspiracies at the government level that the Department of Labor and the Bureau of Labor Statistics is putting out phony numbers at the request of the president. Okay? If you believe that, nothing will convince you of the truth. But if you understand that the unemployment rate of 5.4% is in fact low and much lower than it's been, you understand what's going on. There is a change occurring, and it's a good change. Okay? All right. Next, productivity in the economy is down. What that means is that if a year ago it took 5 workers to produce it took 5 workers 1 hour to produce a widget, and now it's taking 6 workers an hour to produce a widget, that would reduce the amount of productivity. Overall, in the economy for a long time, productivity has been going up. This is a disadvantage if you're a worker, because the reason productivity goes up, it means more output is created by fewer workers. When productivity goes down, less output is created by that same number of workers, that is, fewer widgets in that same amount of time. And the result of that is that it holds wages down and also means less labor, fewer employees are needed. So when productivity is down, if you are seeking to reduce unemployment, or if you will, conversely increase employment, productivity being down is a good thing. Likewise, in terms of wages being flat, the fact that productivity is down and unemployment is down, I have a prediction for you. Sometime within the next 30 to 60 days, wages which have been flat since the recession ended, that is, we've started to produce more in the economy, we've started to reduce unemployment, wages have been flat, within the next 60 days. Today is May the 10th. Happy Mother's Day, by the way, to all you mothers. Anyway, within the next 60 days, wages are going up. Okay, there's been some indication of that earlier, but as of the moment, wages are generally flat. They're going up. Next 60 days, mark my words, or word my marks, it doesn't matter. There you are. Also, changing subjects from the economy. By the way, in terms of the unemployment being down, presidents are really not responsible for the economy improving or going bad most of the time, for the most part, okay? But the fact is, the things, not now, because everything takes time in the economy to filter through and take place, the things that are happening right now have nothing to do with what President Obama did or Congress did last year, last week, last month. It does have a great deal to do with what they did in 2009, shortly after the president came into office with his then Democratic majority. This is not a partisan issue, but what it is that they did then, good, bad, or indifferent, is having an effect on the economy now, which means that most of that stuff was good. So much for Barack Obama being a socialist. In other information we're going to talk about, pigs are making us sick. Okay? Here's what that's about. Pigs, first I have to tell you a joke. I don't tell jokes that well, but I'm going to tell you a joke. a very wealthy woman was being given a tour of a farm area, and they started to pass by this area where lots of pigs were in the field. And she looks over and she says, "What is it they're doing over there in that big mess of mud and muck?" And the person giving her the tour says, "Well, they are in their slops. They are eating right now." And she looked disgusted, and she turned to the man and she said, "No wonder they call them pigs." Okay. Pigs are making us sick, and this is connected to a lot of things, and I want to talk about the things it's connected to. When I say pigs are making us sick, here's what I mean. First off, eating pork isn't great for you under the best of circumstances. And in fact, when they suggest to people for their health to cut back on certain kinds of meat, the two things they suggest are pork and red meat. Pork is technically a white meat, much like cats. But anyway, pork is not good for you to eat, period. But it's even worse because of the way that pigs are currently raised. They're raised on giant pig farms. They're goosed with antibiotics for two reasons. First off, because the way they're raised, they are prone to disease, including MRSA, which is a resistant staph infection, which is transferable to humans and is present in humans. And so they shoot them full of antibiotics with the hope of preventing that. It works marginally, sometimes yes, sometimes no. And additionally, shooting them full of antibiotics also fattens them up faster. So the pigs are becoming fatter, not just larger, but there's more fat content in pork, which is already full of high degrees of fat. And in addition to the pigs becoming antibiotic resistant, so are we. We talked on the show a few weeks ago with Dr. Kotka. You should catch that interview if you haven't. We talked about antibiotic resistance. The way pigs are raised, the more pork you eat, the more likely you are to become antibiotic resistant. It's a fact. You may not like it. If you'd like to start a movement, if you'll pardon the expression, in your local area, let me suggest that you may want to start getting together a group of people and holding a press conference, making an announcement that for X amount of time, I would think 3 or 6 months, you're not going to eat any pork products until the pork industry changes and improves the way it treats pigs and raises them. That, if it were to be carried out, would change the way that pigs are raised and would change the health quality of pork. Obviously, almost no one will do that, but if you choose to, it would be a very positive, or could have a very positive effect on people's health, and not to mention that of the pigs who are going to be killed anyway. But that's among the problems with pigs. But this is, again, connected to something else. What it's connected to is money and politics. Okay? One of the reasons that laws are not passed to change the way that pigs are raised and to make them healthier to consume for humans and to make them healthier overall and to not despoil the water table in those areas where pigs are raised is because the people who raise pigs contribute a great deal of money in what are called campaign contributions to politicians. So if there were less corrupting influence in the form of money being given to politicians by pig farmers, by these conglomerates, and now at the moment the names escape me, but there are a couple of major pig farming organizations. If those political contributions were somehow prohibited, you would have a very different way of raising pigs and feeding those pigs to humans, because the people who are opposed to that kind of legislation would not be as opposed, and they would not block that legislation. So there's a connection. Now, the obvious question is, okay, if money in politics is preventing that kind of change, how do we get the money out of politics? There are two ways that we can do that. The first thing is, and for those who've heard me on the old radio show we did on the internet, this is old hat. But one way would be to change from an income tax-based system to a sales tax-based system. Why? Because a good many of the advantages that major corporations gain by giving campaign contributions to politicians is to get them to vote their way when it comes to taxes. Most of, but not all of, the advantages gained by giving major campaign contributions are in the form of reduced income taxes or tax breaks. Okay? If everybody paid a tax that was created so as to overcome its anti-poor effect. That is, if you have pick a number, 15% sales tax and no income tax, it tends to be regressive in that it hurts poorer people more than it hurts wealthy people, unless you put in some protections whereby food and a certain amount of rent or mortgage payment would not be subject to that sales tax. So, but if you don't have those protections, then it is in fact regressive and hurts poor people more. But if you put in those protections, that would be one way of remedying the situation, because you wouldn't have a reason for people to give campaign contributions because they're not going to get tax breaks. The problem is that not all of the advantages gained by these campaign contributions, and campaign contribution, by the way, is a polite term for bribe. If I give you money to get you to do something I want you to do, and you're a politician and you do it, that's a bribe, unless it's called a campaign contribution. But calling a piece of paper a table doesn't make it a table, any more than calling something a campaign contribution makes it something other than a bribe. Okay. But if the other way we can take the money out of politics and get rid of all the concerns raised by Citizens United, and I'm assuming you know what Citizens United is in case anyone doesn't, that was a Supreme Court decision that said it is unconstitutional for the Congress to limit the campaign contributions, bribes, that corporations can pay to politicians to influence their vote, because money is the same as speech. It takes a stretch of the imagination and the intellect to figure out a way that money equals speech, but the Supreme Court has done that. So in order to overcome that, one, you need a better Supreme Court. But they're not likely to change that ruling anytime soon. And as a result, what we really need is a constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment should call for either or both the following things. One, to rule that money shall not be deemed speech. Speech is speech, money is money. They're both vitally important, but they're very different from one another. And spending in terms of campaigns and trying to influence public policy is not the same as speech. That would be one possible constitutional amendment. A better one would be to create a system by constitutional amendment, because there's no other way to do it logically, where all, at least federal, campaigns are financed by the public. And the public, what the public means, public financing means that if I'm going to run against you for the U.S. Senate or the presidency of the United States, all the money that each of us spends on our campaigns will be equal and will be from the government itself. And the government can choose to limit how much it spends in total, but it can't spend more on me than it spends on you, or vice versa. All right? So that would be public financing. And the way that it would be financed is, yes, we would all be taxed. But the money that we would be saving, and again, that could be by way of a sales tax, what's called an ad valorem tax, or just a change in the income tax structure. But whatever is done, what that would mean is ultimately those things would be paid for by virtue of the reduction in tax breaks to the large corporations, because there'd be nobody to do their bidding, because there'd be nobody receiving their bribes. Now, public financing is partially done now by the checkoff you can do on your tax form by saying you want $5 or $10 to go to a fund that pays for campaigns. Very few people do that, but this would be something that where all federal campaigns would be paid for out of government funds. The other effect of that, by the way, might very well be to shorten campaigns. Since I don't have money, if I'm a candidate, to start campaigning in April of 2015 for a 2016 election, it may shorten campaigns down to the point where they're more like the British and Israeli parliamentary elections, where they're very short. Just a thought. We are almost out of time for the first video, so I am going to stop this one, and we'll pick it up in a minute. We'll talk a little bit more about this, and then we'll talk about this week in history. So if you would, please stand by. You'll see me leave the frame for a moment because of our cameraman not being available.